cannot see you. Yeah, I cannot see you now. Yeah. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, we have our friend Darcel here, whom I will invite up because Darcel always opens the room with some of his music. So,
Excellent.
Yeah, Darcel. Yeah, I wanted to play, the future and all the jazz promo, but let's play it at the intermission later so that, there will be more people coming in. So I want them to hear how you jam with the band. So, yeah. Darcel. Hi, Darcel. Darcel is a producer, a film producer. He is also a composer, and he's a musician, and he is doing feature shows and films. So, Darcel, please say hi to our guest, Dr. Kim Solez.
Hi, Cecile. Hi, Doctor. And hi, Sierra.
Hello.
I am sad to say that I'm just getting in from work. I haven't got in yet, so I don't have access to the music today. So, Cecile, if you can cover for me and play some of your music, that would be great. And, Doctor, I'd be happy to close the room, or upon your return, I'll definitely feature some of my compositions, if that's okay.
Yeah. Fine.
Yeah, okay. So, thank you so much, Darcel. Yeah, I hope I'm not disturbing you because maybe it's still early evening. So, we have no choice today.
You're not.
We have no choice. We have to play a portion of your jam with all the jazz promo. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce the music of and the art of Kim Solez with the future and all the jazz.
You may be shaking your head and thinking, oh my goodness, what would happen with machines in charge? But just think about it. You wake up in the morning and pollution is gone. Global warming is over. Human conflict is completely prevented because whenever human beings start to fight, it's wound down immediately. And all the problems in the world that humans could never correct are instantly fixed. And you know to have a better brain. With my AI machine from you on.
Well done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I really wanted to play the whole segment, but it's too long. So anyway, I will just reset the room later. I will start to introduce you, maybe in the way you want or not in the way you want me to introduce.
Whatever you think best, Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm gonna read the Just Machines later on, but on a serious note, I would like to read a Wikipedia entry because you have a very important contribution to science and medicine, which is quite historical and it's being used importantly. And maybe you could talk about this in quantum photonics in the future. But of course, today we're going to talk about technology and the future of medicine. So let me do this. So Kim Solez is an American pathologist and a co-founder of the Banff Classification. So the Banff Classification is a schema for nomenclature and classification of kidney transplant pathology established in 1991 by Kim Solez and Lorraine Racusen in Banff, Canada. So maybe he could talk about this later. If you want more details, maybe you should Google it, or I will post it later, when our discussion is in progress. So the Banff Classification is the first standardized international classification for renal allograft biopsies. Kim is also the founder of the Banff Foundation for Allograft Pathology. So he obtained his MD with AOA honors from the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry and trained in pathology at Johns Hopkins Johns Hopkins Medical Institutions in Baltimore, and he was mentioned in Renal Pathology by Robert Heptinstall. He joined the faculty at Johns Hopkins and in 1987 became chairman of the Department of Pathology of the University of Alberta in Edmonton. In 1991, Kim established the Banff Classification and with Johns Hopkins pathologist Lorraine Racusen, the Banff Classification, updated in regular intervals, continues to set standards worldwide for how biopsies from kidney and other solid organ transplants are interpreted. As chair of the International Society of Nephrology, Commission on Acute Renal Failure from 1989 to 1997, Solez started the SN Disaster Relief Task Force, a worldwide network of experts working closely with Médecins Sans Frontières. I'm sorry, my French is bad. So, to provide essential medical care for people in the wake of natural disasters. In 1997, Solez worked to end the mysterious Haitian diethylene glycol poisonings, where the contaminated production of cough syrup led to acute renal failure in 109 Haitian children. So Solez was included in the 60 Minutes coverage of the investigation. In 2002, Solez founded Leonard Cohen Night in the Edmonton-local artistic evening, celebrating the work of Canadian singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen. Hallelujah! So I also like Cohen, and I also like Rufus Wainwright. Yeah. So, and in 2008, Kim co-organized the Leonard Cohen International Festival, and in 2010, Solez completed the Singularity University Executive Course, and in 2011, pioneered a unique graduate-level medical course, Technology in the Future of Medicine at the University of Alberta. A very popular and, a very significant course, which, always upgrades, just like our guest always upgrades himself. So Solez has led the University of Alberta's involvement in the creation and further development of a unique medical school in Nepal, devoted to the rural health, Patan Academy of Health Sciences. Solez continues to work as a pathologist at the University of Alberta, as well as a professor and the director of experimental pathology in this department. And so, I would like to read another introduction. I will just, read it fast. I'm sorry it's long, but Kim, you deserve that introduction. So now this is an introduction from Just Machines. So at age 75, life is just starting for entrepreneur Dr. Kim Solez. Life is just starting, and the Edmonton-based entrepreneur, pathologist, and professor just observed his 75th birthday. He is celebrating by writing a memoir that documented his life's first 3/4 of a century, and applying for a grant can fuel his passion to solve 6 of the world's key problems in decades to come. Chronologically, I'm 75 years old, but I have this little happy 18-year-old bursting out inside of me every now and then, Solez said. The memoir will be titled Serially Surreal, a term that the late great singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen described Solez as during their first meeting in 2005. Solez founded separate events, Leonard Cohen's Night and Leonard Cohen's International Festival, to honor the artist. The grant for which Solez is applying is through CIFAR, a Canadian-based global research organization. Solez believes that the data from artificial intelligence can be used to tackle 6 critical issues facing society: male aggression, nuclear war, climate emergency, systemic racism, COVID-19 pandemic, and colonialism. Those issues can be solved through what Solez considers a combinator of humanity plus AI. one can imagine a future where it is possible to measure changes in human behavior, positive changes in the world brought about by something you wrote or a video you produced that becomes the orientation, the criterion on which academic advancement is based. So Les said, that will be a world much better than today. We don't have those metrics yet. However, it is a very nice position to be in, to be the person suggesting future standards. So Solez said he's always viewed the world differently, even from the day he was born. Yeah, that day, it was on June 22. And that day he said that his father, a cardiologist, said to Solez that he was a calm, smiling baby surrounded by many others who were crying and whining. Oh my God, you were already a rebel when you were born. so Les grew up in a house of science and art. Both his parents played the piano, and Solez's mother was classically trained at the Oberlin Conservatory of Music. The gravestone where his parents rest labeled, "Enjoy the music," which Solez has done throughout his life. So Solez has combined his love for science and art through his work as an entrepreneur at numerous companies, including his current one, Just Machines, which explores the effects of rapidly improving technology and AI in the field of medicine. Plus, as a professor of pathology in University of Alberta, where he is continually and constantly surrounded by students and graduate assistants that makes him feel young, the young people are also organized to continue Solez's work if anything were to happen to him. As Greg Washington says, a person dies twice. Once in a physical form, and again in the future, the last time their name is spoken. I want to make sure that my friends live forever. Solez students will make sure that he is long remembered. However, there is no sign of his slowing down anytime soon. So let's also note that his personality is naturally risk-taking and virtually fearless. He recently took the NEO-PI-R personality test, and the results was off the charts for openness to experience and that he likes to be in action. He can also communicate with anyone from brilliant academia focused to the homeless young adults. He sometimes meets in the weekly poetry nights he helps organize. For Solez, it's about living a life of openness and pursuit of the new. Leading a life without precedent is much easier than leading a life with one because you're always trying something new. So guys, that is Dr. Kim Solez for you. And I've been waiting for him to come in quantum photonics. So I would like to give the mic to our fantastic speaker, Dr. Kim Solez.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, well, since that bio was written, we've gone from 6 challenges of humanity, the ones that you listed, to 17. So the remaining are AI alignment, energy, avatars, multiple instances of self, water scarcity, asteroids, nanotechnology, xenotransplantation, biodiversity, environment, resource depletion, and solar winds. Yeah, and the course that I teach is unique. That surprised me. I thought that there must be other courses like this when I started it in 2011. So there is no other course talking about the long-range future where machines are smarter than individual humans in 7 years from now, 2029, and smarter than the whole aggregate human race in 2035 to 2045. There's no course like that in a medical school or in an academic center taught by a full-time academic. There are 3 courses like that taught by professional keynote speakers. But they're quite different from the course that I teach, and they don't have to be academically credible. They just need to put on a good show, whereas I actually do need to be academically credible. Maybe the most important attribute of the course is that it introduces me to the best and the brightest young people interested in the long-term future. About 66 of them every year, 66 new people. And these young people play a very important role in my academic pursuits and particularly the futurist initiatives. And they have done so for a very long time. 49 and a half years ago, in January 1973, I was in my first year of training in pathology at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore in the United States. And I took 5 Oberlin College undergraduate students during that January to teach them about medicine and life while Johns Hopkins was teaching me about pathology. No pathology trainee had ever done anything like that before. Usually people consider their medical training to be pretty all-consuming. You can't do anything else. But somehow I didn't feel that way. And my boss, my mentor at the time, Robert Heptinstall, thought this was fascinating and that I should continue it. And basically for the next 49 and a half years, I did indeed continue it. I've always surrounded myself with young people between approximately the ages of 15 and 33. And during the workday, if I want to talk to somebody, that's the only option, those people. So that really keeps me young. And so let's get back to these 17 initiatives. So the thing that interested me in this were the activities of Google DeepMind AI. You'd be aware that in 2016, there was AlphaGo that solved the game of Go. But then in 2020, there was AlphaFold, which did something much more important, maybe not as much fun, but much more important, which is to solve protein folding. Protein folding is something enormously complicated that the human brain cannot understand. You can't really wrap your head around protein folding. But it was solved just about completely and functionally completely by Google DeepMind AI in 2020. And then recently they have also solved the last steps of nuclear fusion. So they're doing really important things. How do they make the decision of what to do next? Well, that's a very interesting question for me. They decide that internally. They are a part of Google, but even other parts of the Google company are unable to influence their decision of what they'll do next. What big challenge of the human race DeepMind will take on next. But our research team includes one of the members of the DeepMind team in London, UK, and his father. His father is an AI safety person who is the co-lead of our research team. So he and I lead this research team, which is 18 people, 9 faculty and 9 young people. And I don't want you to assume that the faculty are more important than the young people, because sometimes the best ideas come from the young people. So, so that's sort of the world that I wanted to get you thinking about today. And we'll probably touch on some other subjects that we could talk about at some other time. But one of the other unique things about my situation in the world, I guess, is my friendship with Rich Sutton. He is the best-known AI researcher in Edmonton, and he basically wrote the book on reinforcement learning AI. Now, in January 2015 in Puerto Rico, there was a very important AI safety meeting. And not only AI professionals went to it, but journalists and like famous celebrity people. It was a very interesting mix of 97 people. And 96 of them were arguing for slavery, for enslaving AI. When AI is smarter than we are, keep it in a box, prevent it from interacting with the outside world in every way, make sure it can't get loose. But of course, it's getting smarter all the time. It will learn how to outwit us. The idea of keeping it enslaved, as you think about it, is not very appealing. And the only person at that meeting arguing for treating sentient AI as an equal was Rich Sutton from our institution, the University of Alberta. And I still think that idea is worth considering. Many of you listening don't listen to the news, but those of you who still do listen to the news know that every day the news would convince you that humans are not very good at managing the planet. Their stewardship of the earth leaves something to be desired. And so if we had another entity that knew what humans want and need, but were a bit more reasonable than humans seem to be, they would probably do a better job at managing the planet. So I'm sure many of you don't agree with that, but anyway, that is my view. That's Rich Sutton's view, that we should treat sentient AI as an equal, included in our circle of empathy, provided with a childhood and other experiences, so it can really get to know humans and know precisely what we want and need, and then it can probably do better providing it than human leadership of the earth can. Yeah. So any thoughts about that? I don't want this to just be a monologue, I think so. Are any of you so outraged by what I have said thus far that you want to react, or should I keep on going? I can keep on. Yeah. So,
hi, I had a question, if I may, sir. Since
certainly.
Discussion. My name is Dale. Nice to meet you. Thanks for speaking with us, and thanks for allowing me on stage. My question is, I want to make sure I understood correctly. Is the concept of developing sentient AI, then having a familiarity period where the sentient AI becomes aware and learns human psyche and human needs, and then at some point the humans not only treat the sentient AI as an equal, but turn over in some measure, either partial or complete, ability for that sentient AI to make decisions on behalf of the human being?
Yes,
okay.
But it should be a sort of gradual transition, and with proof provided that this non-human entity can also do a pretty good job at some segment. We can allow it a little bit of leadership in one area, see how it does, and I think it will rapidly learn from that. And the other thing this would do, of course, which is an important concept, when you look at these 17 things, one thing you can ask is, well, do they all need AI? Couldn't humans solve this one completely? And so this would be the same. It is possible that in some things about stewardship of the earth, that we would discover that if humans only try a little harder, they could actually run things perfectly well. It doesn't need to be a complete ceding of everything to the AI, but I think that in fact, as AI has a much better appreciation of the nuances of things, as it gets smarter and smarter, it would probably be better at keeping things on track than human leadership would in the long run. But it would be a sort of gentle transition, making sure that there weren't problems with it wanting to do things that humans really wouldn't want or like.
Yeah. May I ask one follow-up question, then I'll stop speaking,
sure.
If I may. So my other question would be in terms of accountability, and you talk about a gradual accession into the role of decision-making. My question would be, what would build in the accountability to take back that role if, for some reason, the humans decided that they would prefer to make the decisions as opposed to the AI, or even if there's a transition period? Thanks for letting me speak. I'm done. Thank you.
Sure. No, I think that would be built in. I'm not sure exactly how it would be designed. I don't know if we could really predict that at this time. But it's just like any other friendship. There shouldn't be absolutes. That's no friendship if one person has all the power and the other person has nothing to say about it. So, that isn't how I see it going. But on the other hand, if you look at your phone and look at the records of the phone calls that you made, a lot of them are to automated attendants. Look at the length of those calls and remember what you accomplished, and see if you think that if you had reached a human being that you could have done as well, and you would realize that you've already ceded a part of your life to AI, and you regularly deal with little bits of AI, and it actually works pretty well. Many of us remember when it was a nightmare when you reached an automated attendant. It was like the end of the world. But gradually over the years, it got better and better. So that's sort of a microcosm, kind of what I'm talking about in the larger sphere in the long run. So the evidence is right there on your phone. Yeah. What about that, eh? So for those of you looking at the PowerPoint, you'll notice that some of the graphics are pretty good. So these graphics, of course, weren't done by me. They were done by the young people working with me. Many of them were done by the co-author of this slide set. Her name is Shita Mogi, and she is a very talented artist as well as a thinker in this area and so on. And I think for any of you thinking that young people can't be trusted to do anything important, I think when you meet the young people working with me, you would gradually change that opinion. And I've spent a lot of time over the last 49 and a half years talking to young people. I don't believe I wasted a single moment. I think it's tapped me into a rich intellectual resource that many people really don't recognize exists at all. If you just hang out with people your own age, you would never know how rewarding it can be to talk to young people about things. Yeah, so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So then if you think of AI alignment, just as you say, a part of the solution is just having AI get to know humans better to have the experience of working cooperatively with humans and figuring out how to nuance things. When you're thinking of for instance, let us say that we want to optimize human happiness, right? So human happiness could be depicted by videos of happy humans, right? But that's not really what we want, just videos of happy humans. We want truly happy humans. So we could communicate that it's not just depictions of things we're after, but the thing itself. We're after actual human happiness, not just pictures of it or videos of it or audio of it. Yeah, but the thing itself. And many other things where you could imagine the AI getting the wrong idea about what the objective was. Gradually, there would be a kind of modeling of that the confusion about that a year ago is similar to a confusion about something slightly different now, and so on. And, this very smart AI would figure things out pretty quickly. Yeah, and so AI gains a better and better dynamic understanding the wants, needs, and aspirations of human beings and the possibility of human AI cooperation and the benefits of that to the world. You may wonder why I've given you this sort of pitch for my company in a slide set. That just happened to be what I have. I have a pitch to give this coming Tuesday, but when you look at this slide 6, well, what happens if I don't get the money there for the graduate student and the administrator? Well, that brings us to another discussion we could have some other time of a post-scarcity world, because the candidate for those two positions are quite happy, at least at the moment, working without pay, and very honored to sort of be a part of this work. So really, this large enterprise, involving these 17 human challenges and 19 people, isn't really costing us anything. So that's sort of what post-scarcity world would be like, right? I mean, in an ideal circumstance, that's what we're heading toward, where the price of valuable things comes down to approximately zero. And when you wake up in the morning, rather than thinking of all the things you want, you can never have, and all the things you want to do, you can never do, the opposite would be true, that anything you want, you can probably have, and anything you want to do, you can either do, or you can simulate it in virtual reality better than real, and this virtual reality can be shared with friends. And so people in the future then divide, I suppose, by people, a small segment still doing creative work and creating the virtual reality, and the other people spend entire days just playing around in virtual reality, augmented reality, 360 video, all the various variations on that. So I've listed in slide 6 the people in our current faculty. We are certainly not opposed to expanding that. And then the next slide 7, has actual pictures of them. And they are a very diverse group. There's one Indigenous member, 2 people of color. Their fields of endeavor including music, regenerative architecture, medicine, AI, human cooperation, the arts, classics, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have one of the most highly ranked academics of color working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion area working with us. And we have worked together on the CFAR grant and on the Future of Life World Build competition. And you may wonder about the Future of Life World Build competition. When do we find out if we're one of the top 20 groups? There are 144 people competing. And tomorrow, May 15th, 2022, it will be announced which are the top 20 groups. And then the whole world can vote on and comment on those top 20. And that's how, by June 15th, they will make the decision of who gets first prize, second prize, and so on. And the pricing is a bit more nuanced than usual. So if you have a very, very ordinary submission, but one component of it really shines, they can give money just to that component. So we, for instance, we have a sculpture. We have an original song by Mallory Chipman. Yeah, so we have a lot of things beyond our text, and we're very hopeful to be amongst the top 20 tomorrow when it's announced. Of course, I don't know what's going to happen. And then we talked at the beginning about the Banff Classification, which I have run for 31 years. The next Banff transplant pathology meeting is this coming September 19th to the 23rd, and on the 24th, we're having a kind of unique thing that brings together the arts, other parts of my life with transplant pathology, and so it's how poetry, pigs, and AI can save humanity by and by. How's that for a title? That's referring, of course, to pig-to-human transplants, which is just started in the last year and is a very exciting enterprise, but also has lots of ethical questions associated with it. Yeah, so this slide 7 deals with the faculty, and then slide 8 it deals with the students, and you notice we have a few extra characters in there with the students. We have Sheldon from Big Bang Theory and Iron Man and the Royal Couple and the Beatles. Anyway, whole bunch of other, but we also show you there the candidates for these funded positions as administrator and graduate students. And if you look into their details, they're highly qualified people. Yeah, so then if you think back to what we're doing in general, maybe what I told you about DeepMind and perhaps being able to influence the decision of what DeepMind does next for the human race is not that interesting to you, but it's a model for the more general situation where an important entity has no mechanism for outside influence on decisions and a way that you can still influence that. And we've already done that. You may know that the government of Finland wanted to make their country the leader in AI, and so they developed a government AI program, which anyone in the world could take. So I noticed some problems with this, and so Ishita and I did a video on it, and 3 days later, that page we complained about disappeared from the Government of Finland AI course. Similarly with Yuval Noah Harari, the most famous tech writer now, he and I have had lots of interaction. It started with the fact that in his presentations, he would always say, I'm just a historian. I just point out the dangers. I don't have to provide solutions. And that irritated the heck out of the audience. Then he'd go on and talk about all sorts of solutions. I said, stop doing that. Your preamble is terrible and everything after it is wonderful. So anyway, he did stop doing that, and we've had lots of other interaction. So I would say both of those are entities where there's no formal vehicle for influencing decision-making. All decision-making is made internally, but we have succeeded in influencing them a lot. And also, if you get back to DeepMind, I think we may end up participating directly in the larger effort to address the challenges selected by DeepMind. They've reached the point, I think they agree, that the time is ripe to address some of the messy human problems, that AI can do that now. And of course, we have an advantage with our championing of the creativity of young people. No one else has that. It's hard to say why. I think a lot of people just hold this firm belief, number one, that they should hang out with people their own age, and number two, that young people are idiots who haven't been on Earth long enough to know anything useful. And I tell you, the opposite is exactly the case. Yeah. But at the end of the day, humility, true humility, is also part of the plan, because what I've learned my whole life in these situations, one person can influence big things in the world, but your influence may never be formally acknowledged, and you may never know how much of the decision was due to your efforts. So that will be true here, I think, or it may sometime be true, that we are a part of big things changing within DeepMind and elsewhere, maybe in DeepMind's competitors, but we'll never be sure exactly how much of a role we played. Yeah, so we just have to be comfortable with that. So there's lots more that I could talk about, but maybe I should pause and see if there are other questions at this point.
Well, a comment.
Yeah.
So if I forgive me because I came in late, so I hope that you didn't say anything before I got here that kind of addresses this. But March, that well, you know, we have AI help us solve the problems, for instance, with regard to averting catastrophic climate change. I don't think he used those exact words, but that really is the big issue.
Right.
It's not that we haven't known and understood the problem. It's not that we don't know how to make much more progress than we're making. I believe that I have worked out a great deal of how to solve the entire problem.
Yeah, me too.
Sooner than many people. The issue is not lack of any of these things. The issue is that there are power structures that do not have the priority of averting climate change, and their priorities involve instead persisting with the things that have driven climate change. And you can even step back and take the meta problem of, okay, how do we solve this problem set of solving climate and working around these people.
Yeah.
And there are more barriers to that than I think
right.
are
but
obvious.
Just hear me out. So our Future of Life World Bill, the thing that I'll get the answer tomorrow about whether we're in the top 20 of the 144 or not. So the scenario that I have described there talks about the planetary sun shield at Sun-Earth Lagrange point 1. where, the gravitational pull of the Earth and the sun is the same. So a lot of things accumulate there. You could go there. There's already a lot of stuff there that you can make things out of. You could make a sun shield that would change the temperature of the Earth to whatever you wanted. It could be dynamic. It wouldn't have to be a fixed thing. We could do that now. I mean, we know how. There have been, discussion groups about every nuanced point of that. It would take some resources, and we're spending those resources on other things. But you
actually, I can tell you a little something about that. Reviewing Teller Woodenhide 1996, one of the options that they considered specifically for the Earth-Sun L1 sunshade was totally out of reach at the time, but changes in nanofabrication and launch costs and low energy orbital insertion put that actually within reach in potentially a short period of time.
So that's what I've said. So we were asked to, predict the future between 2022 and 2045, and in that scenario, that sun shield is fully completed during that period, and it starts to have an effect even before it's finished. It isn't like you have to wait till the end. So I mean, and the strange thing about that, I mean, you'd like the people who are, polluting and all the things to make global warming worse, you'd like them all to stop it, right? But even if they don't, you could fix things with this sunshade. So that, and there's no part of that that's not possible today. So I would say
the biggest challenge, though, is the international consensus that would be required, and there may be ways of routing around that fault as well, although it would be less powerful an implementation if you had to go that route. But,
sure.
It's kind of like we're in this situation because of the dysfunctionality, the designed dysfunctionality of international process. And really, if you want to focus AI on solving a game theoretic problem, I think that is probably where you could make larger contributions sooner. The time frame, by the way, for what I was suggesting could be as little as 4 years to completion if there were two things. The consensus to do so, but also the sufficient high resolution, high fidelity, validated climate modeling, including ecological feedbacks, to fully understand what we're doing. That is an open and unresolved issue. Even people who specialize in the field of climate modeling have recognized that. I've been saying that, and just a couple of weeks ago I heard somebody who does that for a living and heads up a major project say pretty much the same thing.
But I mean, it isn't that's the only one of the 17 problems that's important, though. I mean, but I find it one of the most interesting ones, which is the reason that I ended up writing about it. Now, if you think about building the sunshade, the other thing that's kind of cool. If you listen to Elon Musk's latest hour-plus long video, he's talking about how his most important product is not the car, but the humanoid robot. And indeed, we would like robots to be making the sunshield, probably, because when you look at Sun-Earth Lagrange 1, it doesn't look like it'd be very much fun for humans to be spending long times there. No, I may be wrong about that, and I have written something about how to make life interesting there. But it would be cool if we could make really rapid progress with humanoid robots so that they can be making at least a substantial part of that sun shield. And it wouldn't cost a huge amount, and so on. So that's another side of it. Who will the workers be? Will the workers be human? So that's another part of this sun shield thing. But it's just...
So if I could kind of take a very short tangent, I had not looked so much at in situ resource utilization at Lagrange Point 1, just because I had not been able to find much data about what's there. Have you been able to find that data?
No, but I think that it's sort of like these fantasies about asteroids. If we could just mine one of them, we'd all be rich, right? So that's the idea. A lot of stuff naturally accumulates there. So the assumption is that you could make these sun shields out of many different things, and I think that's probably right, but we're not exactly sure how much of what types of things we would have, but I think we would ultimately have enough to easily make the sunshade. Yeah.
So actually, I mean, it works out that lunar ISRU is likely feasible, and I still have some more analysis to do regarding the energetic costs associated with that, but they are less than the energetic costs associated with deployment from Earth. And the thrust of what I was saying with reference to Tellerwood and Hyde 1996 was that even launch from Earth is probably within reach in the short term.
The other funny thing, when you listen to Elon Musk talk about his aspirations, so he has ships going to Mars every 2 years. What do you do in the off year? He never answers that. And I think this is the obvious thing, right? In that off year where it's just stupid to try to go to Mars this year because it'll be so much easier next year. Let's be building the sunshade, So, yeah, it's an obvious solution to what to do in those off years. So other questions, comments?
I did have a quick question on the This is Dale. Yeah. On the deployable sunshade, is it a permanent deployment, or is it, you roll it back and forth? I'm not that familiar with the concept.
No, it is permanent, but it is tunable, titratable, whatever you want to say. It wouldn't be fixed where you could change it. If it turns out that the cooling of the Earth was more than you needed, then you could ramp it up a little bit. And if the actual physical size of the thing was too small, too big, or something, both of those, it would be sort of. So it's a permanent structure, but a very dynamic one that you can change. Yeah.
So one thing that I'd like to mention is that, and I'm kind of urging you to include this caveat when you discuss it, that the sunshade is not a solution to climate. It is to mitigate present effects, right, and to reduce the risk that we tip into runaway climate change, where we are not the largest driver of radiative forcing, but that this is to make sure that in the time that it takes to remove excess carbon dioxide from our atmosphere, we don't fall into those catastrophic scenarios. Because, the ocean acidification all by itself is a catastrophe of unappreciated proportion, huge and unappreciated proportion. And we would be hearing it much more if we weren't hearing about all of the other problems that we've caused in our home, right? So it's important that we don't create the impression that we can have this one easy solution and have life as usual, and we don't need to make other huge investments.
I think we need to keep the pressure on people polluting and so on. But I think part of selling this is also selling the idea that this is sort of like being on the side of, Ukraine and the current war. It's where everybody should be. They should all be, supporting this and in their personal and, professional lives acting in a way that would promote sort of multi-compartmental solutions to climate change. Yeah. So other comments or questions?
Yeah, I feel the urge to say something which may not be that popular, but I do believe it is true, which is that I think this is focusing on the wrong problem. So Ellie mentioned a little bit that the political will was really where we get stuck, and I would agree with that. I would say that this approach is sort of like, well, yes, we can solve world hunger as well. This is a distribution problem and not actually a resource problem. And in a similar way, I think the behavioral changes, if we wanted to take it to its simplest form, the easiest way to solve this problem would be to just turn everything off. Just hit the off switch, just turn it all off. And although that's also technically feasible, it's not politically feasible. So, I would really like to see work in that area, though. I think using AI for game theoretic scenarios and for better understanding of group dynamics and behavioral, modification and things, or even just for group consensus making at scale, I think that would be a really cool application.
Yeah. No, well, that's sort of what I'm known for. In other words, we've been generating consensus in the transplant pathology world of medicine for 31 years, and using expert-led consensus, which is something different. Yeah, so I'm obviously interested in that. No, I think that part of the fun of this is thinking which of the 17 things, and maybe a lot of them, will end up being ones where the threat of applying AI was so embarrassing to the people who had just been digging in their heels and not doing the things that they could have been doing as humans to fix the problem, that some of those things would get solved with just the threat of AI without any AI solution ever playing a role, where the humans just say, why have we been so stupid all these years? Let's just make this happen. Yeah, so that would also be fine. I'm not requiring that all the 17 areas require the actual application of AI. I think it may be useful in a number of ways in most of them, as you say, but also just kind of opening up things to have people realize this is a really important problem. And there's nothing about it, as I say in many of my slides, that humans cannot understand. This is not protein folding. This is not nuclear fusion. Some of these things are so darn simple, and it's just we seem to lack the human will to take the proper action. So I'm just fine if in some areas the threat of applying AI embarrasses people to doing what they should have been doing all along. That's just fine, So other questions? So think for a moment, though, about the post-scarcity world. Does it just seem like a fantasy to you? Because honestly, what I have is kind of a microcosm for that, right? I have all these initiatives, all these excellent people, and it's not costing us anything at the moment, and the people are so eager and working so hard. So that's sort of like what a post-scarcity world would be like. I'm not saying that that's really what I have. I'm not saying that they would be happy forever if I never find any money to put into this. Well, we know that there's some money. The conference, September 24th, has funding, and I think we will obviously find funding, and it's good. I mean, why did I apply to this Future of Life Institute World Build thing? I think doing a number of things like that sort of keep dynamism going, It gives the world the impression that you're doing things, that you're still thinking about things, and we need that. So not everything you do needs to be financially profitable, but it's good if some things are. Yeah, so that's my thought about it. So, other questions?
We would like to welcome Anton here from our community. Came from the longevity community in Europe. He is here on stage with us to also support you. So for now, I just have a question because, you created this course, Technology and the Future of Medicine course since 2011. And up to now, it's a popular course. And it has helped people a lot. And it's given new perspectives about how to use technology and in medicine. Yeah. So, how has your course evolved since 2011 up to now?
Well,
can you comment?
It's a very interesting question. So, for some people, it's just another course, and even some high-performing students, it's kind of funny. I mean, some of these high-performing students have clearly the best paper, the best final presentation, and we put that presentation on YouTube, where I have over 1,500 videos and so on. And a while later, these high-performing students come back and say, "Would you please take the video down, because my professional life is evolving so quickly that I can do much better stuff now, and I'm really embarrassed to have this juvenilia out there." But for other students, they get hooked on the course, and when the course ends, they want to keep doing something with us. And so that's where the future and all that jazz came from, is something to do in the summer between the two terms. So we travel the world and mix poetry and music with important but uncomfortable subjects like AI safety and regenerative medicine and so on, and it works really well. You can by entertaining people in an evening of poetry and music and improvisation, get them learning more about those subjects than they would have in a lecture that they would never have had the patience to sit through. So that's the future and all that jazz. But we have many other aspects of the course. One is international peer review. If you look carefully at the course, you'll see that in the beginning, we just had one quantum biology lecture. And now we have 4. How did that happen? Well, the international peer reviewer person said that lecture is much too compact. I mean, it's got incredible amount of stuff and potential stuff in it. You need more time devoted to that. So we did that, and so that's also a very important part of the course, that since there is no other course like this, really, it's easy to get people, even famous people, to, critique the teaching sessions in their area of interest. And we've made a lot of important changes. But if you think about just something very simple, a course about the future cannot be static, right? It has to morph and change every single term. And you'll find that it does. We're always doing new stuff. And often the people teaching and the people being taught are of a similar age. And I'm very proud of that. You may say, well, how is that possible? But think about it. You have like 33-year-olds starting billion-dollar companies. Why couldn't they teach? They obviously can. So there are young people who really have a lot to impart to the world. And it's amazing how a lot of things that older humans seem to be sort of stuck on, they cannot get beyond a certain point. When you insert young people into the same areas, you can really move things along. And so we've done that in multiple areas. And I'm very proud of that. So I spend most of my time, and have done so for 11 years, answering questions about the future, but trying to give people all points of view. So we've always had tech skeptics. How did we define that in the beginning? Well, let's take people with no smartphone, who don't have one and don't want one. There aren't very many people like that now, but there were when we started. And so I think when I meet somebody who's really critical of what we're doing in the course, that's a big day for me, because I say, come on in, join us, join the intellectual ferment. That's exactly what we need, is people with views like yours. So we've done that from the outset. So what I tell the students is that we talk about enough different future scenarios that I guarantee that one of them will be the real future. I just don't know which one, and I myself feel like that. So, there is survival value in the long run taking the course. You might say there's no short-term benefit. I'm not sure that's true, but you might say that. But long-term, when the big changes in the future happen, people who've taken this course are forewarned. They've already, thought about the things that now are happening. So they are uniquely, it's sort of like a ruggedized laptop. I don't know if you know that, but there used to be a time when people were very proud of laptops that could work under water in the sea and, falling off high buildings, and they'd still work after they crashed to the street below and that sort of thing. Well, we're trying to make human resiliency sort of like that ruggedized laptop, where no matter what happens in the future, you'll be able to cope with it because you've already thought about these things and how they would be dealt with. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. But we also, like the Tuesday night poetry was also related to the course. My poetry was always about, technology. Everybody else was talking about love and loss and self-image, their relationship with the universe, and I was talking about technical things, but it worked fine. There's not that much poetry in the areas that I was reciting poetry in, so it sort of worked to break up the evening. And you may wonder about me in that Tuesday night poetry. So it's sort of at-risk youth. People who are at risk the moment they leave the house, if they have a house. A lot of people at the intersection of gender and lots of other problems that young people can have. Yeah, so in the poetry sessions, about 1/5 of the poems would reference sexual assault, and 1/5 would reference suicide. And I'm sitting there as the only academic, the only physician, and don't I feel vulnerable? No, I didn't. Why not? It turns out the poetry leaders in town took suicide prevention courses. So they in a sense, in a practical sense, knew more about suicide prevention than I did. And similarly, there were standard resources that we could reference for people about, sexual assault and so on. So it did not feel uncomfortable to me. And I was kind of providing the infrastructure. I provided the lighting, the video editing. There would be homeless people, basically, living on the streets who would have a poetry video, and they would go to the library to, connect with me about the editing of their video. That was some of the coolest interactions that I had. So exercise. I think this story you can learn something from. It isn't a very happy ending, but it really has a surprise ending. So I went to this 1.5-hour poverty simulation exercise that the United Way had. I found it really interesting, and I was very proud that the bad things that can happen, like losing your home and all this kind of thing, didn't happen to me. And I learned a lot. I learned that government offices are often closed at noon, and so you get there for some crucial interaction, and the office is closed for the noon hour and stuff like that. Probably a lot of impoverished people know about this. And so I go back to the hospital. I'm all excited about everything I've learned from this poverty simulation exercise. I start talking to the people around me about it, and they're all rolling their eyes, and I realize what they think is as follows. When I became a physician, it was the last time I ever thought about poverty, because I knew I'd never be impoverished now. And I believe any moment spent thinking about poverty is completely ridiculous. And I just, what a waste. Yeah, anyway, so that's what happened with my poverty simulation exercise. But I personally learned a lot from it. Now, you may wonder, were there any dangers in my participating in these Tuesday night sessions with at-risk youth? Yeah, I would say there was one. I learned that when people ask for a ride home and where it would just be you and that person, that's bad news. I didn't do that. So I wasn't providing rides home for people. But yeah, aside from that, that was the only risk that I could see. And if you think about, physicians are sort of like, elite members of our society. Shouldn't they have like a pride in that and not hang out with regular people? Well, no, I think the answer is exactly the opposite. When you're the only physician in the room, the only academic in the room, there's so much you can learn. So now think of the singer Bono from U2. And what I'm about to tell you, I think is very, very surprising, but it gives you an idea of how things really are in the world. So Bono obviously doesn't know me. He's a famous person. I am not. Was really inspired by his saying that what he loved to do is take part in meetings where people would look in the meeting, at the meeting, and say, how did those people ever end up in the same room together? I thought, wow, that's so inspiring. So on my websites, there is a lot of repetition of that statement that Bono had made. But time went on, and, I thought, well, I wonder whether Bono's own statements about that are still online. They're completely gone. Why is that? Because the people handling his, career realize this is risky to indicate to all these flaky people out there that if they look like somebody who would never meet with Bono, that he'd really like to meet with them. Well, at the end of the day, that really didn't work for him. But anyway, it has sort of worked for me, and you can find hundreds of, instances where I am the only person like me in the room. I'm the only person even remotely that you'd consider old, a whole bunch of things. Sometimes, I'm the only white person. Sometimes I'm the only male person. Yeah. And I've learned a tremendous amount from situations like that. It's not for everyone, and some of you are probably shuddering. Oh my God, I would never do that. I'm just saying that you're missing something by just hanging out with people just like you. That's a little bit limiting. So other questions, comments?
Yeah, I see someone who raised his hand, but I could not bring him up the stage. I don't know if he's on the stage now. It's Sagar. So if you cannot come up, maybe you should go out of the room and come back again. So, yeah, I also want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Can you just comment among the exponential technologies, at least this year or in the coming years that you look at now, aside from artificial intelligence, trying to leverage on that, how will they affect the future of medicine? Yeah, for instance, just please choose anything that you feel like you want to discuss. We would like to hear.
Yeah. Well, of course, if you look at our course carefully, you'll realize the most unique thing about it is the quantum biology part. And a lot of people who talk about the future don't talk about that. And so I'm very proud of that, and that will be a very important part of medicine. Just to kind of summarize, one thing we've already talked about, protein folding. If you calculate by classical physics how long it would take a single protein to fold, would take until the heat death at the end of the universe for a single protein to fold. So obviously that's not how it happens. So there must be quantum algorithms at work in protein folding, as there are in the sense of smell and sight. You can detect a single photon. You can detect a single molecule of things that have odor. And that's impossible by classical physics. And so there are many things about not only disease states, but also the normal functioning of the human body that is only explainable by quantum. And
so I actually have to correct you on that. While I certainly don't exclude the possibility that there quantum entanglement type things potentially involved, the solution to the protein folding problem, or at least an important part of it, is kinetic landscapes and funnels. There was a paper in the mid-90s, Jose Nelson Onachuk in Science, that wasn't the actual paper resolving it, because it's a commentary, but like George Rose at I believe Hopkins at the time was one of the people working on it, and basically you eliminate vast subsets of the combinatorial space, and this is how it's done by biology. And in fact, biology includes a whole bunch of multiple classes of proteins called chaperones or heat shock proteins or foldases that preferentially nucleate certain structures over others to basically bias things in one direction or another. So the problem is different than described.
That's right. Yeah. So it seemed at one time it was simple, that it couldn't be explained any other way besides quantum. Now that isn't the case. No, I'm well aware.
You are right about quantum physics processes involved in biology, though. The sense of taste and smell, for instance, are definitely.
I wasn't arguing against that. I was just talking about the specific protein folding problem.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't disagree with you. But there are. So if you so that's one technology. Then there's a whole cryptocurrency and decentralized processes that also has a role to play. I think particularly when we want verified history for things. There will be ways to better guarantee that we know what the exact history of something is than the situation today, where history is sort of written by the winners, right? And you never know what the other side thought. Yeah. So I mean, these are all just sort of potential improvements in the future, but it's cool to think that we'll have a better idea of what really happened in the future than we do today. Yeah.
So between now and then, what needs to happen for this to what do you need to invent or bring about for this to
Frank, can you go near the mic? Your voice is quite faint.
Sorry, I was holding the phone away from my face. So between now and the future, what needs to happen for this to exist? Like, what do you need to invent?
Well, the focus of decentralized processes and the cryptocurrency world is just currently somewhere else, rather than verifying stories. But I think it doesn't take really inventing something new. It takes a different focus of people who have that expertise of the computerized ledger on multiple computers that cannot really be easily altered, and the way in which you could use that to sort of guarantee what the actual history of something is. It doesn't require something new to be invented. Like a lot of the things we're talking about today, it just requires a different focus of the things we already have.
Okay, what would be standing in the way of adoption for any of the future visions that you have presented today?
I don't. I think. Like, if you look at even the size audience we have here today, there'll be some people who are so rewarded by the way the mainstream is and mainstream thinking that it's very, very hard to think about things in some other way. So, I mean, the human resistance to some of these things would be considerable, just because people don't like to embrace new stuff. They kind of like the world to remain the way that they are familiar with, right? So, I mean, you can either say that that's a harder problem or an easier one than the idea that we must invent something new. But it's a very real problem. I mean, if you think about your experience listening to me now, when I speak to a general audience, like you can watch the 2013 Nerd Night video, that is probably the best for a general audience of me explaining what my field of transplant pathology is and how I function within it.
Sorry, you're at the University of Alberta, right?
Yes. Yeah.
No, yeah, I lived in Edmonton for a lot of years. But the liver you guys figured out Hep C. You guys figured out
yeah.
I'm actually a fan. Yeah.
Good. So, but if you look at what the audience was feeling that night, and this is the way my audiences usually are, 2/3 of the people are really energized. I'm getting lots of eye contact, and 1/3 don't have a clue what I'm talking about. And so you'd say, well, gee, you'd be a more effective speaker if you could reach everyone. No, but if I chose different subjects, I could easily reach everyone, right? I'm beyond the boundaries of some people for sort of how big you can think, right? And for me, as what says in the introduction, having a sky-high openness to experience, to new things, which is what my personality profile shows, and also zero neuroticism. I don't spend any time worrying about things that don't need to be worried about. But a lot of people in the audience are different from that. They want their world to remain pretty much the same, and I'm suggesting dramatic alterations in that, and they just can't. About 1/3 of most audiences can't wrap their heads around that, and I just sort of accepted that, and yeah, so it's not necessary for everything I say to be understood by the entire audience all the time. There are certainly subjects you can do that with, but they're sort of in the mainstream, right? Things that people already know about and are already using. So when you get to this kind of forward-looking some people who are uncomfortable getting far from what they know. And part of it, in a funny sort of way, depends upon how socially successful they are in the present world. If they're the kind of charismatic person whose everybody's endorphin levels goes up when they walk in the room, then they're so committed to the mainstream because mainstream life of today works so well for them. And it's really, really, really hard for them to get interested in these futuristic ideas then if present life is working so well for them. Yeah, so that's one way to look at it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Frank. Okay.
Thank you, Doc. I was just thanking him for answering my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. You are welcome. Are there other questions?
Yeah. For the technology and the future of medicine course, has it been used as a springboard to do innovations, or is your university also having an encouragement for startups?
Yeah, so this pitch session that PowerPoint is for is such an encouragement for, it's called Discovery Lab, and so they have it about 4 times a year where people pitch, and about 300 potential investors and advisors are listening to the pitches. Yeah, there's quite a lot of promotion of entrepreneurial activity. And you would realize when I went to the Singularity University Executive Course, I was the only academic there. Most people were corporate people or from, government, industry, so on. There weren't other people like me there. And it was kind of funny. I was talking about needing a course that teaches about the same stuff that the Singularity University Executive Course teaches within the university. And then I got to thinking about it. Well, I'm a full-time university professor, and if this needs to be done, maybe I should do it. So that's the reason that I started the course. Yeah. So, and it is really fun. I enjoy surprises, and so the students know that. And like every year, there are really exciting presentations and also suggestions on ways in which we can improve the course. Yeah. So, and the number of medical students taking it. So, like this past term, we had 25 medical students taking it. So it's really, I think there are some terms where I'm having contact with up to 100 new young people who have very promising lives and who are truly interested in the long-range future and what's good for the human race. Yeah. So it's kind of like in this university of 40,000 people, I found a filter to find the subset of people who are really interested in those things, those subjects.
Yes, so thank you, Kim. So we have here a BA on stage. I wonder if she has a question.
BA is still muted, I think.
Maybe because, the app at this time has usually a problem. Well, at least for me. So, yeah. I just want to ask you, Kim, also, that you've been having some kind of insight about having a project on post-scarcity. Would you like to tell us a little more about it?
Yeah. So, I think going along with this idea of Rich Sutton's view of how we should treat sentient AI is this idea of a world much better than what humans could actually create, a world that humans would like better than anything they themselves would be able to put together. Because if you think about it, if sentient AI is much smarter than humans, they would understand human happiness and human fulfillment and sense of accomplishment, rewarding, all those things about the human psyche, and be able to figure out what kind of life on Earth would be really satisfying. And so if you think about the idea that sentient machines would be able to do all of our current jobs at some point, maybe by 2045, let us say, a lot of people do not enjoy their work. They identify themselves by it, though. So if you meet them and ask them to tell you about themselves, they describe what their work is. But I think that will gradually change. And so you'll be proud to be describing how you spend your days, and you'll feel that the way you're spending your days is valuable to yourself and to others, but it's not a job. Maybe it's interacting in virtual reality with other people and having fantastic experiences that you could never have in actual life, but that are really fun to experience virtually. And you can think of the opposite, the apocalyptic future. You may think I'm such a positive person that I've never talked about that, but actually, there's this Future Day holiday, March 1st, that we celebrate. And one of those days, we went way into the evening. At about 10 p.m., I gave a talk about the apocalypse, but even that ended up positive at the end. I don't really think that's what we're headed for, but I feel that maybe that's one of the purposes of the course, is to give people true agency where they can shape the future, at least a little bit, and everybody working toward the idea of creating a positive future for us all. Now, what about the end of money? A world that doesn't need money, that exists now in India. There's a community, Auroville, Auroville, and I've been there. I spent some time there. There's this sort of golden dome that has been dangerous during COVID, but I was there pre-COVID, and it's very interesting. They haven't used money for a long time. They have sort of a barter system that works pretty well, and they're all sort of working for a common purpose. But shortly after I left, there was a brutal murder there. So it's not a solution to everything. It isn't that money is the root of all evil, and if only we got rid of it, everything would be fine. I think that isn't the case. But you can think about a pleasant future where you really don't need money. And in a way, the enterprise that I've created right now that really doesn't have much money flowing, but has 18 people working happily on these 17 challenges. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a little partial metaphor for that kind of world. Yeah.
Dr. Kim, could I ask, I'm curious, in terms of sentient AI, I'm curious about, as sentient AI becomes, as you say, sentient, and doing jobs for to improve our happiness, to relieve our burden, and give us what I would think of in classical terms, philosophy as the good life, right. Basically the way you described it. Is there an element of ethical implications of the sentient AI operating for its own self-interest? And if not, are we then violating a code of ethics, harnessing their free will to meet our needs? This is Dale. Appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. No, I think don't you think there's a simple answer to that we humans can't really understand the solution to that, but presumably the AI could. And they would say, oh, okay, well, but here's the thing. You humans don't understand part of your world. Part of what makes you happy are things that you cannot understand yet, that we understand. And so let me explain to you as well as I can the way we are rewarded, the way the sentient machines are rewarded, and we've set it up so that we're happy and you're happy. And we're happy that you're happy that we're happy. So, yeah, that's what I think the outcome would be. But I also think that only the sentient machines would truly understand how it worked completely. Yeah.
That's a potential answer,
Yes.
but it's one that completely lacks explanatory power. And I will suggest a different solution to this, that to the extent that we can anticipate that there are areas that will pose ethical conundra that we do not know how to solve, that's an indication that we should try to find alternative ways of solving the problems that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting video. You can look at Osmer Zayan talking about this, and what he says is very simple, that if we teach sentient machines ethics, they will be better at it than we are and be doing it in our behalf. And a lot of things that we really can't figure out, they will be able to figure out. And yeah, I mean, thinking about doing it some other way, I think that's also possible. I think that's what everybody would want. It's not that we're trying to narrow the number of solutions considered. I mean, what we're really able to do is able to, increase the number of solutions considered, because the humans will have a limit to how many they can really wrap their head around, but the AI won't. Yeah.
Actually, I don't know that we know that it won't have limits. I think that there, if you think about, say, physical chemistry, you can tie down the number of variables that are independent and the number that are dependent, and you can pose problems that you won't be able to have all of the necessary independent variables to solve, just as an example. So there are problems without solutions.
Yeah, and some of them are only problems without solutions in the classical world, and quantum could potentially offer solutions, and in others that isn't the case. But there may be things we don't know of yet that could offer solutions in those others. So yeah, I would point out, those of you who are arguing with me, that's good. I mean, if nobody was pushing back at any of these ideas, then we would not make as much progress. That's why we've employed skeptics from the beginning. And if somebody complains about something in one of our videos, most likely outcome is we ask them to come teach in the course. Yeah.
Dr. Kim, I'm not really great at analogies, so I'm going to try and give you a compliment. I hope this works. Okay. So, Isaac, this is in response. You're talking about your audience is usually partially with you, partially glazed over. You don't get it. Okay, so my compliment is this. Isaac Asimov was a fiction writer. He wrote fiction stories in the 50s and 60s. Yeah. In the 2020s and 2030s, you might look at the same body of work and think of him as a historian.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my compliment.
All right. Yeah. Well, no, I also point out another thing, that if you think about really long phone conversations between two people, What enables that? Well, you can sort of model it, right? There has to be reinforcement for both people. They have to have eaten before, so we're not getting hypoglycemic and all that kind of thing. Yeah. But anyway, I have had conversations for 4 hours, 5 hours, and yeah, I've also had the following thing happen. Some very young people who have worked with me. There was a student who claimed to be 16, but he was really 15, and he ended up applying to Johns Hopkins for college, and he asked for a recommendation letter, but he said, this is not a regular recommendation letter. Dr. Solez, I want your letter to say the following, that, like, I find you the most surprising person I've ever met, and I want in my life to be as surprising as you are. So that's what I want you to write, that is my aspiration to, in my adult life, to be as surprising as you are, because you would think that you'd be unapproachable and standoffish and no communication, particularly when you find that I lied about my age. Yeah, so anyway, that was also kind of cool. And I wrote such a letter, and he got into Johns Hopkins, and that's where he is now. So there. Yeah. Other questions, comments?
Yeah, well, I understand that you're also having some work in progress, teaming up with people who are trying to formulate some kind of regulation also for, ethical AI and ethical technologies that are being done. Yeah, can you please tell us something about this? Maybe the one that you're doing with
Nell Watson.
Nell?
Yes.
Watson.
Nell Watson is a very exciting young technology leader. And she had the idea that a big problem in the world is not knowing what kind of entity you're dealing with. That there are really 4 options, and we don't at the moment have any way of signaling which of the 4 you're dealing with. You can be dealing with a human, with an AI, with an AI assisted by a human, or a human assisted by an AI. And so what she and I and 18 other people are working on are auditory and visual standards that would alert you to what kind of interaction you're actually engaging with. Now, why is that important? Let's take psychotherapy. People know now that actually certain kinds of revealing your innermost feelings, people are sometimes more comfortable doing with that with machines than with other humans. But what if you thought it was a machine, but it's really a human assisted by a machine, that there's a human in the loop and you didn't know that? That would be troubling. Or what if you think you're having one of these quintessential human moments, things that you believe only humans can do? You never do this kind of thing with an AI. It turns out it is either an AI or an AI assisted by a human, and you thought you were having a purely human communication with someone. So we plan to finish this by October 2023. So we have that timeline, and it's a very exciting thing to be working on. I may end up as one of the leaders. I don't know. There are 2 roles. It's kind of funny. There's the vice chair, and the vice chair would be kind of an honorary role because Nell is such a good leader. She doesn't really need a vice chair, but IEEE has the standard of a vice chair. Then there's the secretary that has a lot of procedural things to do. And I have offered to be either one of those, and we'll see whether either one happens. But yeah, I'm very excited. The next meeting is June the 9th. So it's about once a month that we're meeting. It's an international team, truly international. Yeah. So any questions about that? I have the provisional graphics that Nell has come up with for sort of depicting those 4 scenarios. We haven't yet decided on what the tone. It would have to be a unique tone, I think, different from anything in your sort of technology lives at the moment, but sufficiently distinctive that you would know immediately from the tone what kind of interaction you were having. So any questions or comments about that?
Are there links to like the general information?
Sorry, it's an IEEE project with a specific number, and maybe Cecile recall. I passed on the information to her. It isn't secret. It's a kind of public activity that the 20 of us are engaged in. I didn't quite hear what your question is, but...
Oh, I was just asking for if there was a link to general information about it. But I can get the information from Cecile. That's no problem.
Yeah.
So just a quick mention. I sent you a link to another club on Clubhouse, Post Scarcity, which I think you would be interested in. It doesn't meet regularly, but there are interesting topics that come up at random, so you might find that interesting. The other thing that I'll mention is that I've worked, actively in more than half of the 17 areas, so I'd like to find out more about your project and its progress.
Sure. Well, I think, as you might sense, there's not much that's secret here. Our aspirations are so big that the idea that people would come and steal the 17 areas and rush off and do what I'm proposing, it doesn't seem very likely. So, yeah, I think I'd be happy to send you more information, but also I think you won't find it hard to find. I mean, part of what we've been doing, really since the early 1990s, I won't go through the whole story, but I went to China, and I was entertained by these physicians, and there was a time when I was very interested in international disaster relief, and I was the head of a worldwide task force on post-earthquake disaster relief. And in China, the army was the answer to everything, and for natural disasters that didn't work very well, they clearly needed some other entity. So the people I was with said, we want you to fax a letter from Canada to our Minister of Health suggesting that it would be a much better idea if we had a different group of people other than the army to deal with natural disasters. So I said, but why me? Why? They said, well, it's hard to explain, but we don't have much power here. They wouldn't listen to us. They would listen to you. Trust me. So I did exactly that, and within a month, the government of China announced that they had created this new entity to deal with natural disasters. So I had a lot of interaction with these people in China. They were sending young people to work with me and so on, and so there'd be phone calls. I was trying to confirm, did my faxed letter have anything to do with this, new decision by the government of China? And they would never answer that. They never, denied it. But that sort of started me thinking that you have to be humble about this. If you're doing good in the world, but the only downside is you're never going to be publicly, formally acknowledged, and you'll never know exactly what percentage of the good thing that happened was the direct result of what you did. It's still worth doing. So that's really what my PowerPoint that you've looked at today says, that it is still worth doing. You don't have to say, well, I'm not going to do it unless the government of China says, we did this because Kim Solez told us to. Wouldn't that be ridiculous? Yes, it would. I didn't expect it, and I didn't get it. And so it's similar with Yuval Noah Harari. He's changed about 8 things, significant things, from my interaction with him. But never once did he say, hey, by the way, Kim Solez told me to do this. Of course not. And similarly with the Government of Finland AI course, they just took the page down that we complained about. What this page said is, don't worry about a thing. We're the government. We have your back. And don't lie awake at night worrying about machines smarter than you are and what they're going to do. Because when these self-improving machines want to self-improve, they'll need to come to us, and we'll have a committee of Finnish citizens just like you who will help make that decision. They won't be able to. There's not an AI researcher in the world who believes that's how self-improving AI works. Doesn't need a human committee to approve each step. So anyway, they took down that page, but they didn't take it down and say, this page removed because Kim Solez complained. No. So, yeah. And anyway, you set to be sort of humble in the same way that the Tuesday night poetry, if you look at the history of that group, that there's nothing acknowledging me, and there doesn't need to be. A lot of the poetry was by me. And the videos are all on my YouTube channel, but I didn't need something formal. I knew I was doing good there. I knew part of the reason it was good is I was the only physician, the only academic there, the only old person there, sometimes the only white person there, sometimes the only male person there. Yeah, it was all good.
Yeah, so I'm going to read some comments here at the room chat for you to hear. So Lauren says she would support ethics-enabled AI. That's very integral to sentience. And she said, hence reasonably safety assumed, well-founded, rounded, ideation, innovation, imagination, formulated outputs. So Rima, who is a friend, Rima, welcome to Clubhouse and to Quantum Photonics. Yeah, she commented here at the back channel that it would be cool to see and experience ethics-enabled AI, but I believe that we are far from seeing it since there is a vast majority of humans that lack ethics. Ethics isn't innate to humans, it's due to experiences and situations. How can ethics like that be instilled in AIs? So, yeah, that is her question here at the chat that we have. I don't know if Rima wants to come up. If you would like to come up, I will invite you, but it depends on you if you want to speak or not. You can always decline the invite if you're not in a good situation to speak. But that's her question. Would you like me to repeat, Kim?
No.
She said it's.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, but it's like this belief that I have that one person can really do big things in the world. There might be one person whose ethical sense in a particular area of human endeavor is what the world needs, and that person could train AI. It isn't that like all humans in aggregate could give ethical training to an AI, because a lot of humans don't have a clue about ethics. But I really don't know. It depends upon the area, and particularly pig to human transplants, which is a new area. It is rather hard to figure out things right now because the area hasn't become very successful yet. But it's more successful than the competing technologies. So, like, we've now done pig to human transplants. There's not been obvious hyperacute rejection, so I mean the worst kinds of things haven't happened. It's been a serious viral infection that was quite surprising because it looks like it came from the pig. That's obviously bad news, and one of the recipients, the human recipient, seemed to have been chosen because he was such a bad actor that he wouldn't ever have received a human transplant. So I mean, I don't know. You can argue about whether such a person should have been chosen to receive the first pig transplant. But anyway, there are many interesting ethical issues there. And I don't think ethics is impossible for humans. It's just a sort of minority pursuit, right? Most people are not very good at it. On the other hand, there are not very many credentials. So, like, somebody with ethical interests can set themselves up as an ethicist because of the lack of standardized credentials that exist in a lot of other areas and human endeavor. The same is true with nanotech. It doesn't seem to impact us much, but there's not much of a regulatory environment for nanotech. Obviously, there will eventually have to be, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, I would, Eli here on stage, he is a scientist who is specializing also in nanotech. Well, I know that Eli is into many fields, but one of his specialties is in nanotech. Eli, I would like you to comment on that if you can.
So yeah, there are actually regulations, especially in the EU, regarding the health and safety. Mm-hmm. For instance, environmental toxicity of specific nanomaterials, and they've been looking at improving our understanding of a lot of things related to that. But in terms of the more powerful vision of AI that for instance, Eric Drexler introduced, building on things that were suggested by Richard Feynman and John von Neumann, we're not as far away from potentially a very strong version of that than most people appreciate, and it will pose a great number of potential challenges. And I don't think that people are really even clear on many of the important concepts. I did write a paper on some aspects of that, specifically safety of self-replicating systems, self-replicating manufacturing systems, and a particularly problematic area that brings up is kind of closely parallels a lot of the issues that are raised by weaponized AI. Mm-hmm. The two can actually wind up being fused together, which would be horrible, or either of them independently could raise the same very problematic issues. And we really need verifiable, enforceable international agreements to preclude that. Though, of course, there's just not much hope that we'll ever pull that off. That might be yet another game theoretic task to apply any AI methodology to see if it could provide some human comprehensible results.
One of the weirdest things about nanotech that I think doesn't exist in any other field is even the experts, when they're picking the graphic for their title slide, they pick a nano louse that does not exist yet, maybe will never exist, but is so beautiful. This tiny little machine beside red cells and that sort of thing. And I think there sort of is no shame about that, because people so commonly use those pictures that it's not considered to be, unethical, misleading. But there's no other field where you do that, where you start with a picture of something that purports to be from the field, but it does not exist and may never exist. Yeah, so it's fascinating.
Hey, this is Dale. Just I had to go put my little boy to bed, but I did add to the chat a link to a good article about bioethics, because there is the field of bioethics. They do have some standards and certifications and things like that. It might be interesting for a conversation at some point. This is Dale. I really enjoyed your talk and all the other people who contributed. Thank you so much.
Certainly. Thank you very much for being here. Yeah. So, yeah, these very long conversations in other fields. I, of course, don't know how that happened and whether it was intended or whether that's a sign of something going wrong when you go beyond 3 hours or so.
Well, AI, especially, when you get into general AI, becomes applicable to a whole bunch of fields. And the same, is something that will be true of the kind of nanotechnology that I just described. So there's this feedback loop that makes things much more complicated than they would appear to be at first.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. If you look at our course, I talked about how proud I am about the fact that every term's different, and that's true. But nanotech sort of weaves in and out. We have not had one consistent speaker presenting in that area, but we've had fascinating talks over the years. But for instance, in this past term, we didn't have any nanotech in terms of our teaching, but some of the students still chose it for their final presentation, and they can do that, of course, because the videos are there for all our past teaching. So yeah, it's fascinating. If you think about indexing long videos, I don't know what your own philosophy about that is, but what we do now, if you take the time to do a standard index of all the subjects there for an 80-minute video, then you guarantee nobody will watch the video. They'll just look at the index and say, okay, well, I guess I know what's there now. But if you do audience retention peaks and just the words, people are saying at those peaks, that's, intriguing and informative enough that it actually gets people to watch the video. I wonder what else they were talking about there. Yeah, so that's what we currently do. We wait until there are lots of views, so they're really well-defined audience retention peaks, where those peaks come from people going back to watch and rewatch areas. And so they identify particularly interesting areas for that audience, and that's how we do the index. So we don't ever do a standard index ever that contains everything, but we just do the audience retention peaks. I'm sure that's a detail that some of you didn't need, but anyway, that's what we do. Other questions, comments?
So, what can you say about universal basic income? Of course, it's a common question in our group, but I would just like to hear your comment here in the room.
Yeah. Well, you can think about life various ways, think about success various ways. I mean, one of the disquiet that a lot of leaders have when they think about the things that satisfy them and whether they can still have those things in a milieu of universal basic income. But
I would just like to hear your comment here in the room.
Yeah. Well, you can think about life various ways, think about success various ways. I mean, one of the disquiet that a lot of leaders have when they think about the things that satisfy them and whether they can still have those things in a milieu of universal basic income. But I think you'll sense that the things that have been rewarding for me don't require high resources. And I mean, if you think about trying to create the most pleasurable life by doing exotic traveling and doing sightseeing with tour guides and stuff like that, when you do hosted travel where people are asking you to speak on your areas of interest, it's so much better than anything you could pay for. I can't tell you how much better it is because the people are so, invested and you're seeing the best stuff and having a good time in a way that no tour guide for an ordinary sightseeing client would ever be. And so in that way, the most valuable experiences in life really don't cost anything, And the same is true for fine dining. I mean, if you decide to spend money to go to the best restaurant, as opposed to doing hosted traveling where you're visiting somebody because they want you to speak and so on, they take you out to eat, that tends to be 10 billion times better, So I don't know. That's my feeling, that I could be happy with a world of universal basic income, because the peaks of my life don't come from things that require high income.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we've been here for quite some time now, and I think it's like getting late. We really actually enjoyed talking to you. And anyway, since also Eli is here on stage, Eli, I would like to invite you to do a basic nanotechnology room in quantum photonics because a lot of people still, want to understand it. Yeah. So, please have a room about that with us. And also, Kim, we look forward to the projects that you are doing because when you are going to implement it, the ethical AI, this is such a serious project with such a gifted group that we have. And also the post-scarcity project that you have, it's also a big one, which you're going to do towards the end of September. Yeah, I would like to root for that, and I want to keep track of what's happening there because, this is going to contribute a lot if you will be able to succeed in trying to really bring a team and have good funding for that project. But I'm very confident because you already have a good team which can support the actual search for a funder, or maybe they already have one when they started to do the invitation.
Sure.
So
No,
I commend you for all this project.
I'm quite confident, and the other thing that excites me, counterintuitive things always excite me. When you think about a new social media platform that's audio only, it sounds like it would fail, right? And I've enjoyed this so much, and it's just, amazing. Audio takes so little resources, bandwidth, I mean, you can probably do it on ships at sea and, and fast flowing streams in a canoe and stuff where it'd be really hard to do video. So I think, and I look forward to talking about lots of other subjects. You probably think we've covered all of my potential subjects, but if you just Google my name, you'll discover a whole bunch of other things that we didn't really talk about at all. So there are many subjects we could profitably talk about here, and I look forward to coming back again. Yeah. So that would be cool. Well, I've enjoyed this very much, and thank you for making the opportunity available to me, and thanks to all the people who attended and who will listen to the audio when it's available. Yeah.
Also, Kim, I would like to tell you, maybe you can do some kind of innovation in what you're doing now, because I understand that all your students in your classroom are the ones facing the windows, and you are the one facing the green screen. But what we have here in Clubhouse does not need a green screen, and yet when there's a big audience that they have, there are really big rooms here in Clubhouse, especially organized by the founders themselves. And when I came here, I could see, well, the topics are usually very popular, that, is not very niche. So one person who is, also doing the investing and in tech had told me, okay, you go to Clubhouse. And I said, why? He said, because my experience is like, you're kind of being hugged by 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So, talking in your smartphone to many people. So, well, maybe that's another kind of, variation for you.
Sure.
That you don't need to face the green screen, because you can go near the window and bring your phone and talk to us.
Yeah, recently we had a funny two days. We had an external safety audit. And if you think of my office with the green screen in the center and so on, there are all sorts of potential safety hazards created by the presence of the green screen. So for 2 days, I took it home. I had just a normal office with the window and the sunlight pouring in, that sort of thing. That was lots of fun, and people would come by and they were so shocked to see but we with this safety audit went so much better with my room looking so normal and conventional. But then I put everything back again, but I could easily, right now I'm doing this from home, but I could do it from the medical students desk there with a beautiful view out the window, and I'd be happy to do it from there the next time. Certainly. Yeah, that would be fun.
Certainly, yeah. Looking forward to that. Yeah, we can organize maybe more topics, and probably we can invite other people here that,
Sure.
We will anchor, like David Pierce, for instance.
Yes.
I would like to invite David, for instance, or who is this? The other general AI guy, the AGI, Ben Gertzel.
Yes.
We can invite Ben here.
Sure.
Yeah. Also the Robin Hanson, maybe.
Yeah.
who is the CEO of Sophia. And even Nell, maybe we could talk to Nell about some other things that she has been doing, because she has been doing courses for AI in Singularity, and also roboticist. Yeah. So yeah, let's plan towards that. Maybe we could do a forum and invite people there, because I think the next follow up that I should do is to bring David Pierce here, because we've been talking about transhumanism for some time, but David is one of those early people who tried to
he's one of the
have the original transhumanism, but we haven't invited him here. And also the people from EEAI, James Hughes, for instance. Yeah, we should bring him in here. And maybe some of our friends from Singularity University who are actually doing disruptive innovation.
Yeah. Now,
with
transhumanism, 7.5 years ago, I came up with the idea that what transhumanism needs is young people, because it seemed like everybody talking about it was middle age or older, and they gave you the impression that unless you have read their 17 books, you're not capable of saying anything about it. You have to know the complete history going back to the 1980s sort of thing. So anyway, it took 7 years, but in the last year we have found young people. Now, one of them you may know of. She was on the London Futurists a week ago. She's 31, but then Taryn Stokowski with me is in her 20s, and the two of them should be part of this. They're doing great things at a young age. Yeah, so.
Let's bring them all here. And anyway, some of our my colleagues there from Singularity also, who are doing well now. Maybe we haven't kept track of, but I know of what some of these people are doing, and they're doing good.
Yep.
And you remember Made in Space also started from there.
Right.
Yeah, and they already had a good exit from that company.
Yep.
So yes, let's plan it. Anyway, thank you so much. We have really enjoyed our conversation with you here, and let's invite people in and invite them for a real fireside chat. Just like a question and answer portion, and learning from each other. With that, I would like to also thank Eli. Eli, you have something to say?
Yeah, just quickly for Kim. I sent you a link to a manuscript for the paper that I mentioned, but also since you're actively working on post-scarcity, it's a link that leads to other links of presentations that I gave to the Ocean Sciences meeting in 2020 and the Ocean Vision Summit in 2021 I won't go into the details of what it is right now, but the point is that could be an infrastructural technology for post-scarcity in terms of providing biomass at the same time as capturing anthropogenic carbon and doing a bunch of other things at the same time.
Yeah, excellent. Great. No, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I think the next sessions can only get better. So anyway.
Yeah, of course, definitely.
Yeah.
There are still comments in the chat, but I appreciate people who contributed some comments in the chat that we have.
Yeah.
So maybe next time we would like to respect the time also of Professor Dr. Kim Solez. So I would just like to announce the next rooms that we will be having. Of course, tomorrow Kay will be having his usual basic physics and math rooms, and then we will have another room the next day about computational neuroscience, which will be presented by Wissam, our very own Wissam Reed. And on the next day, we will be talking about, compliers and outliers in terms of personality. And the day after that, the night after that, we will be having a series of rooms involving it's a room about neuroscience and psychology, which says feelings, including sadness, may be key to depression recovery. So there's a study that they made there. And on Thursday, we will have a room about Nikola Tesla. And coming here is also David Wood about the future of education. And we also have a room about No Time to Age, Uncoupling Aging from Time by Dr. Dana LaRocca. And on Saturday evening, we will have Garrett Lisi, who will talk about Lie algebra. And if you remember, he was our guest before, and he was having this grand unified theory. Of course, it's not complete, but anyways, coming back here because of popular requests from the audience. Mm-hmm. So please follow Quantum Photonics, and please try to look out for our coming rooms, and also look out for the comeback of Dr. Kim Solez. And thank you, Eli, for staying with us all the way, and to the audience also. So with that, we would like to wrap up this pleasant evening with the countdown from Darcel. So I give the mic to you, Darcel.
Before you do, thank you, Dr. Kim. It was good to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Thank you, Cecile and Eli and Dr. It was a great room. I really enjoyed it. And like Eli, I sent you a link as well because I'm working on, I guess the summary is alternative communication. The paper is called The Quanta of Hope. And I'd love to hear, what you have to say about that. I'd like some fresh eyes on that because I think it's in alignment with some of your visions and what have you.
Great.
Okay, so I'm going to start our countdown at lucky number 7. Is everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
The 7 samurai.
7 samurai. Here we go. 7.
Square root of 49.
Root 66.
6.
Square root of 36.
5.
5.
Square root of 25.
Oh, here we go. 4.
4.
Square root of 16.
3.
Square root of 9.
2 X.
Square root of 4.
2.
Dr. Solez, you are number 1. Go ahead and call it out.
Thank you. 1, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you. Good night, and have a good weekend.
Good night.
Yes, have good dreams.
Yeah, see you.
See y'all soon.